Hey everyone, welcome to Chat B2B, the podcast that gives you a front row seat to AI in B2B marketing. I'm your host, Andrew Rao, co-CEO of Intercept, and on this show, we chat with enterprise marketing leaders who are exploring AI. We look at their use cases, we look at their learnings to help inform our own transformation journeys. Today's guest is Jaynie Miller. She leads worldwide product marketing at HP. And after years of leading teams, she's intentionally stepped out of management to become a senior individual contributor again. And her thesis is that in this AI era, the IC is uniquely positioned because they've got that front row seat to all the tools and the workflows and the changes that we are living every single day. So we dive into what that transition has unlocked for her, how product marketing is changing because of AI and what is not changing, and finally, what do marketing teams need to do? How do they need to be restructured to succeed in this new era? Lots of great stuff ahead. If you like what you hear, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This is Chat B2B. Let's get into it. So Jaynie, you recently moved from management to being a senior individual contributor. What was that like? That must have been a bit jarring at first, but tell me, what was that experience? What did that kind of unlock for you?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't describe it as jarring, actually. It was really more of a smooth transition. And it was something that I asked for and that I wanted. So maybe that had something to do with that. I just thought after all these years of leading teams that it might be valuable to take a break for a little while, not forever, and go back to an individual contributor role. What I have found is, I guess first off, it's been very educational. Just you think you know what people on your team are doing, but when everyone is so busy, I know what the output is. And I know what I hear from them. I knew what I heard from them directly, but the day in and day out was not something I had as much awareness of as I thought I did. So things that, you think are easy or maybe not as easy as you thought when you're not doing it hands-on every day. We've been doing a lot of transformation, and so lots of new tools and change management, which is always incremental to the daily work that needs to be done. And so it was a little eye-opening in terms of just understanding what the impact of that is, and also gave me some ideas for maybe how to do that from the management or leadership side in the future, just a little bit differently.
I could see that it actually would make you a better manager. Again, having that again, that being reminded of what people are actually doing day in, day out, kind of gives you a unique vantage point. You mentioned that you had asked for sort of that transition. What made you what made that trigger for you? Because that's super interesting to me.
A lot of people are surprised by that. And for me, day in and day out, I love marketing. And I love content creation. I love strategy development. I love understanding the customer. And I felt like I was getting a little bit removed, maybe just from the creation standpoint.
Got it.
More than the other two. And when you're a manager or a people leader of any kind, you spend the majority of your time in meetings. I was spending 7 hours a day, easily 5 days a week in meetings previously. And I did feel like I was losing touch a little bit with doing the actual marketing. So that part was something that I was really seeking a reconnection with. And so that aspect of it has been fantastic. Like, wow, I feel incredibly fulfilled for different reasons. Because I love to problem solve, I love to create, and I really think of my work as not selling something or marketing something, but communicating to customers in the best way that is mutually beneficial.
Yeah. I actually, it's interesting because this discussion that I have often is, who's more uniquely positioned to thrive in this sort of, as we call it, AI era, but Is it the individual contributors? Is it management? And there's this growing school of thought that the actual individual contributors are becoming even more valuable, potentially one of the most valuable players on the field, because they are hands-on with the tools and they're seeing the workflows. And when you think about, you've mentioned change management, they've got a front row seat to all of this. And so, I mean, I know it's still relatively new in that transition to relative to your tenure as a manager, but what's your take on that? Do you on that whole sort of IC versus manager perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting because I spent a little time thinking about this, and there's no doubt that the importance of the individual contributor is not going away. Like you said, it may be increasing, even though there's this
Yeah.
school of thought that everybody's going to be replaced by AI, and I know we'll get to that a
Right.
little bit more later, but
Right.
um, it's just simply not true for some of the reasons that you mentioned. I think depending on the organization and their size and their culture and their maturity, that
Yeah.
may impact um, the relative importance of a manager versus an IC.
Mm.
I think in both cases, they have to be hands-on with the tools. And what's challenging for managers, or can be, is how little time they may have to get
Yeah.
hands-on with the tools without dedicating the extra time. And
Hmm.
I know personally, I had a lot of great intention, but could not invest the amount of time that I wanted to
Yeah.
get deep into the tools. I invested some time, but there were never quite enough hours in the day to do it to the extent that I wanted to. So I
Well,
see that as a benefit for anyone in an individual contributor role because they do have that bird's eye view and that firsthand experience.
yeah. It sounds freeing in a way of
Very much so.
being being able to get back hands on and seeing things for the, on the front row. And I actually think that as an IC working with the tools, you're actually learning how to be a good manager because you have to treat the tools almost as a, somebody on your team. And that, how do you onboard them? How do you train them? How do you teach them what good is and what bad is? And right, in terms of the output quality. So it's almost like management and training in a
It
way.
is. It's a different type of management, but I agree. You have to use the tools as almost like a person or a team member.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not just as simple as you put in a single prompt or a couple of prompts and you get what you
Yeah.
want. It's really about a dialogue, if you will, and
Yes.
working with them. And I think onboarding is a really good term to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, agreed. So maybe walk us through what your day looks like now as a senior individual contributor. Where does AI show up, and how is it kind of integrated into your workflows? Obviously, focused on product marketing.
Sure. I'll just touch on and acknowledge the fact that the administrative aspects of the AI tools are
Yeah.
very useful and practical, right?
Yeah.
Things like taking meeting notes or summarizing um, your email inbox
Yeah.
after you've been out for a few days, or um, really summarizing any long form content that you may get to make it more digestible. But that said, from a product marketing standpoint, from a research standpoint, it's incredibly
Mm.
valuable using it for competitive analysis, looking at not just positioning and messaging, but the full SWOT analysis of your competitors, because you can go
Yeah.
beyond their own websites and see what media and analysts are saying about them, what's publicly available that
Yeah.
you could look into, but it would take time or um, it would take time away from something else to do that. And it's incredibly
Right.
efficient. And
Right.
so that's useful. Understanding the customer better and not just who the prospective customer is, but going beyond that to capture listening data. You can use AI to look at what your prospects are saying in Reddit. What does Google Trends say? So that is incredibly efficient and effective way to use AI. And then you can use it for persona development. So those are some of the ways that I like to use it. In addition to things like helping me get started on first drafts. Looking at my competitors' positioning and, thinking about it relative to the positioning I'm working on and how I might be able to differentiate it in a way that's valid and true, but I might not have thought of based on the offering. And then just for making content better. And again, it's not just doing it for you. It is a solid first draft, and that's a real time savings, but it's not doing the job for you.
I think that's a key distinction, right? And I know we've all said this, I'm sure, at some point, but AI is as a co-pilot, not an autopilot, and you need to sort of stay in control. But it sounds like a lot of landscape listening in terms of competitive sets, understanding your customer, which I think is really key from a product marketing standpoint. If you're going to build the right solutions and you got to position the right way, you got to know your customer the best. And you also have to differentiate against what everyone else is saying, which is all kind of coming together, right? And sounding so similar. So when you're doing that, I find that some people have this hesitation of, well, it's going to hallucinate and it's not going to do it right, which I think that hallucinations have been reduced significantly. I mean, not to say it's perfect, but what have you found in that? Because that's synthesizing a lot of data, and I'm sure as you've checked stuff, how good has it been for you?
I would say it's been pretty good. Not the synthesizing is good. I think you always have to view what the results are with a critical mind. It's interesting. Like even before this, I asked one of the tools that I use, like, I'm an experienced marketer. What can you help me do better? And
I love that.
It clearly told me from its perspective what it thinks it helps with and where the shortfalls are. And the critical thinking was one that was called out as a shortfall. And I know that's something we've talked about before, but there's sort of a misperception that AI is all knowing and maybe it will get there someday, but I don't think it's there yet. And I catch errors, right? I think we all have. And so you can't just take what you get and use it as is. And get the quality that you're looking for.
I mean, I bring it back to the analogy of AI as a teammate. And so we are not perfect as humans.
Right.
And when we're collaborating, it's like, hey, I'll check your stuff, you check mine. Like there's this, camaraderie that way. I feel like that doesn't go away just because it's AI and people think they have this expectation that AI's got it should be perfect. It's like, but humans aren't perfect either. So it's interesting. You talked about sort of your tools. What would be your favorite AI tool for work? What do you use the most, or what's your favorite?
Well, being in a big corporation, I can be somewhat limited because of security concerns in what I use. But that said, I probably have the most experience with Microsoft Copilot. I've also started using Claude recently. And I have seen that they have very different strengths, which is good. So I don't know that I have a favorite. I think I have a favorite for different use cases, and it's not always the same.
Yeah, it's a good point because it's like each one has its different strengths, right?
Right.
I hear, and you and I both are in the Microsoft ecosystem, and when I talk to different organizations, I find that people always have a lot of questions about Copilot. They're like, I've got access to it, don't know how to quite use it. And I know others, for example, organizations like Veeam, they get a ton of value out of Copilot. And Jessica Hria, who leads the marketing AI transformation, office there is become like a super fan of it. What is it that, do you have any tips on how to get the most out of Copilot? Like any things that you found, any tips or hacks on that side?
The first would be learning how to create an agent
Okay.
to help with something. So, for example, there's a marketer who has a specific messaging approach, who's an influencer, very active on LinkedIn and social in general. And she's got some really good tips and sort of a framework for how to approach messaging development for tech solutions, so that you're not using jargon, which, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, every tech marketer was using this jargon, or almost
Digital
everyone.
transformation.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There's some great memes about all of that. But the jargon, getting away from the jargon heavy approaches to speaking to people like they're people, right? It's a novel idea. But that, because her content and framework, she's got a web presence. I asked Copilot to create an agent for me using the principles that she uses. And so when I ask for help with concepting, like from a messaging standpoint or positioning standpoint, I ask it to apply those principles, and Copilot could go out and find out what those principles were and applies them very effectively. And it takes just a couple of minutes to create an agent. So that part was valuable. There is a lot of free training available for using free and, I guess, low cost training available for using AI for different purposes. And then there are other resources that people can access. But using the agent and doing some continuing education or professional development around it, I think is very important. Even if your employer doesn't fund it for you, I think it's investing in yourself, and learning those skills is so critical. Like learning how to create the most effective prompts and sharing with people that you work with.
Good point.
We do that within our organization. Like two people are trying to get to the same information, one gets much better results. So I had that happen where somebody was getting a better result than I was, and I was like, "Hey, what did you do? Can I see your prompt? Like, how detailed were you? What did I miss in mine that made the results not quite hit the mark?"
Yeah, I agree. I think we all need to share, because nobody has it fully figured out, and everyone's got like a bit of a different approach or strategy. So I like that. What about Claude? You mentioned Claude. What are you starting to get into with that one?
Yeah, what I have seen is one, it's a little more flexible in terms of the type of inputs that it can handle.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be quite as defined or perfected to get the result that you're looking for. And then I think in general, what I've experienced is higher quality drafts for any kind of strategic work.
I see. Okay.
And so it seems just to have more strength in maybe creating some of the depth, where for me, Copilot's great for leveraging the work that I do in the Microsoft environment. I'm using Teams, I'm using SharePoint, I'm using the whole Office suite.
Yeah.
Copilot does an amazing job of helping me leverage and extract from those files and resources like chat history. Really good at research and synthesizing what's out on the web as well.
Yep.
Maybe not quite as strong in the depth, creating the depth.
Yeah. I have similar findings in that I think Copilot is really good about knowing your ecosystem, your files that's connected to everything, right? If you're running on M365, like we are, but Claude does seem to have a little bit more horsepower in terms of some of the thinking, which now what I think is interesting with Copilot Cowork, and they jumped on that pretty fast, actually. I was surprised when I had seen just how fast that had come together. But leveraging Anthropic and being able to have, basically kind of bring your own model, right? It's like, all right, you want to run it on Claude, go for it. So I think it's really smart what they're doing with that, with Claude Cowork. So, okay. So of all the use cases, right, that you had mentioned, research, knowing your customer, first drafts, and messaging, what has been most game changing for you, or kind of like the biggest impact so far in your workflows?
I think the biggest is probably helping drive anything that requires a lot of internal alignment, working across different stakeholders,
Interesting.
changing maybe the way something's communicated without changing the meaning. And there's a lot of nuance to how people communicate. And sometimes an attempt to clarify something gets misinterpreted further. And yeah. So I see that help there, and just working cross-functionally with a large group of people requires that ability to communicate and adapt as needed. And then translating strategy into enablement, product marketing strategies and approaches, sales enablement approaches, helping connect the dots for sellers, making something really tangible from the strategic to what does that mean for them today and what they need to sell and be successful. So those are the main areas for me.
That is very interesting to me, because what I'm hearing is that AI is helping basically, strategically position things internally to make sure that they understand it, that they're seeing the value in it from their perspective. And also, like, whether that's sales or different departments. And again, as an expert, I see you're supporting different teams. So every team cares about a different thing. That's actually a really good. So is that like in terms of comms and sort of communications that way, or is it like whatever the asset itself, you're kind of shape shifting it to be more useful to them? Because I think that's a really good use case.
It's both, really. I'm maybe a little heavier on the assets, but it's both because, as you said, different stakeholders have different priorities, and different teams who are doing similar work but are not in the same organization may have slightly different priorities. So it's important to kind of serve them all effectively, if you will.
Yeah. That actually, I think, is, I would say, maybe 70-80% of the challenges that we see is, a lot of it is just internal misunderstandings around expectations. So that's actually a really interesting use case. We talked a lot about what's changing and how things are different in AI use cases. What do you think is not changing? You think about sort of product marketing. What do you think is like tested, tried and true, and someone always going to be here in terms of like a requirement or a foundation?
I think number one, and this won't change regardless what tools are available and what innovation comes, is the importance of understanding the customer, building something for the customer, and then communicating them to them in a way and in the places that they want to be communicated to.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change, and that's foundational. And yet sometimes the customer can get lost in the day-to-day just a little bit as people
100%.
are focusing on driving internal goals. And so I don't see that changing. And I hope that the other thing that won't change is that product marketing will continue to be sort of the pivot point or the connection in between sales and engineering, whether they're product managers or deep engineers. And I would say also being the voice of the customer is a role that I don't think product marketing will lose.
Yeah. I actually think that, again, I mean, who knows what the org of the future is going to look like, but I think product marketing only gets even more powerful, because I think that product marketers have a unique ability to sort of run with the engineers, understand somewhat technical, nuanced subject matter and designs and, the core product, but then know how to translate that to maybe a less technical audience and like, what are the core benefits? But then to your point, that's like also knowing the customer. I actually think that marketing maybe shifts even closer to product marketing, like the overall marketing function maybe shifts closer there. Because when you said that out loud, that actually makes a lot of sense of like the whole function itself actually becomes more important in a way.
Yeah, and that's not initially where I was going with that, but I think you raise a good point, and it's thinking about the experience and bringing the empathy.
Yeah.
And empathy meaning understanding the customer, understanding pain points. What if they've been using that's not working or is working for them
Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
And then how do we make those experiences better? That I don't think that's something AI can replicate. Maybe it will to a point, but not fully in the way that a human being can.
Yeah. And I think there's the accountability layer too. It's like you can't blame the agent, right? And so there's got to be the human accountability, but there's also that like sort of gut of knowing what feels right, you know? And even I was reminded the other day of, I think it was Seinfeld that was originally, when they did the testing for Seinfeld, it actually performed really poorly. So if you just purely went on data, that show should never have been aired. But there was I think it was NBC, there was one executive that said, no, I think this is something. And so when it launched, it kind of had this like really small following. And then it almost changed what people found funny. Like it almost redefined humor in a way. And so that's one of those human intuition gut calls that AI can't do. Because if it's purely data driven, right? Purely cold data driven, that show should never have aired. And yet one of the most successful franchises.
That's interesting. I didn't know that it didn't perform well in the pilot, but it certainly did take a different approach to humor and really, I think, started with a cult-like following, and maybe you could say that's what it continued with. But wow, that following got massive and continued on.
Right? So it's interesting. So I think the human touch, that human instinct is just so valuable. I wanted to ask you about some misconceptions about AI. What do you find that you're having to defend or maybe clarify when people come to you and say, "Hey, Jaynie, here's sort of the value prop of AI," or this isn't the value that I'm seeing. What is the biggest misconception that you typically see?
I think the biggest one is that everything's fast and easy, and AI will just, you can put in a prompt and you'll get something back and it's perfect, and then it's on to the next thing. And that's certainly not true. It is helpful, and there are time savings, but I think what it allows is for people to do a higher level of work and contribute in different ways than they might have been able to in the past, if for no other reason than for time constraints.
Yeah, I agree, because I think people seem to think that AI's got this, it's like one shot and it should be perfect. And, it's like we talked about, yes, it's read or been trained on the equivalent of 200 million books, but it is generalizing that knowledge, and it doesn't have the specific context that you have, right? That you need it to fire on. So it's not an easy button or like an instant get it done button.
Not at all. And I think that your point about generalization is a good one, because I guess you could get something much quicker, not in one shot, but much faster if you were okay with everything you're doing being generic. But that is not really the intention. I think if you're really looking for everything to be generic, then I'm not sure that you're going to be successful, number one, and number two, that I don't, I wouldn't even I would say, like, investing in tools to do your marketing without, the right ratio of humans is not going to get you the right result. But certainly it can help you do better than where you've been by taking away some of the upfront work and maybe some of the more time consuming work that isn't quite as value add.
Yeah, I agree. I almost think that the market is just going to get louder and louder as it gets flooded with purely AI-driven content, like these sort of like content farms. And I think marketing becomes harder in terms of how you break through, because when it's just so loud, it even pushes the need for more creativity higher. Because it's like, you build this like immunity almost to the same words and the same content, and then it's like, how do you just break through and make somebody even notice your campaign? Because if you don't have the stopping power, it doesn't really matter if you have a really great message. They're just never going to see it, or they're never going to hear it.
Right. And I think, as in addition to the creativity, experiences become more important. And that could be experiences with your product, experiences with your customer support, experiences experiences with your brand. The in-person connection, or even in-person virtual connections, I think, become much more valued in a world where more and more is being generated by computers or AI.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. It's almost, I feel we will get to a point where we will have to think about what we trust. And does that mean, in-person interactions become even more important, and these sort of like meetups and, events to some extent? Is that the thing that you end up trusting? I don't know. I mean, I think you still need the scale. I think I think good content still will resonate and I think become even more premium, but I think there just becomes a trust issue. You talked about AI saving you time. So if AI were to give you, if it saves people 5, 8 hours a week, let's say, where should that time be reallocated as we think about product marketing? Where should we put that reallocated time to?
I think a significant part of it needs to be reallocated to spending the time with customers, with partners, either reading about them, conducting more research, ideally interacting directly with them more in a virtual setting or face-to-face setting would be first and foremost. And then secondarily, finding ways to put more time and energy into strategic planning and execution. And I should say, when I say customers, I always consider partners as part of the customer base, but I should probably call that out.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, right? Both the channel partners and the end customers. It's funny. I actually, as you say that, I think about what I actually really enjoy um, about what I do on the strategy side is actually get to sit in on these discussions with the ITDMs and the BDMs. These are like one-on-one 60-minute in-depth interviews on like any subject, right? Like depending on what the client project is. But, or what was the most recent one that we did was around, how AI is impacting the buying journey. So how they use AI in finding vendors, in comparing vendors, in evaluating vendors, and then recommending vendors internally and all that kind of stuff. And you can learn so much by just asking them that probing question, right? And I actually really enjoy that. I think I'm aligned with you that that's where we should be spending more time, for sure.
Yeah, and reading research is great if you're getting, if you're getting the feedback from the scale of users or customers, prospects. But there's nothing really that replaces the hearing it directly from someone, hearing them speak the words, if possible, whether it's recorded or not. It I think people tend to not just interpret, but really resonate with what they hear when it's heard versus just read as, 200 people said. Like, that's meaningful. But I think the two really need to go together.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of that quant and qualitative side. It's interesting. There's this new vendor that again, I think we'll probably be doing an episode with them at some point, but they actually have a platform that will do these qualitative interviews done by an agent. So like an actual AI agent does these one-to-one interviews. And I was thinking, will people enjoy talking to an agent versus a person? And hearing some of the recordings and how people engage, they actually really open up to these agents, and they explain, this and that and the reasons why. So it almost like sits in between surveys, like the standard quant surveys, and this in-depth interview. But the advantage of this platform being you can do, I was going to say you can do like 500,000 simultaneously, not that you would, because that would blow your budget, but you could do a lot of these at scale. So it's interesting. I don't know what the future of research will look like, but there's these kind of new formats that are popping up. So
yeah, it's fascinating.
So as we look ahead, I think that everybody is restructuring. How do we make teams more agile? Or they're freeing up capital, whatever it is, depending on who it is. From your seat, and you've been in both, again, management as well as on the IC side, what does the right marketing team structure look like? Like where and I know we don't have a crystal ball, but loosely, what do we think that new structure needs to solve for? And just directionally, what is your thought? Because a lot of people are talking about this, and everybody, I think, needs to share their opinions to be able to get to a good point. But
yes, it's a widespread unknown, if you will.
Yeah.
I think I've spent some time thinking about this. Like, how much do you need transformation focused people versus implants sitting within teams, if you want to call them implants? Right, dedicated members of
100%. Yeah.
the broad scope of the organization who are working with the transformation team to help push that forward. I feel like that's maybe a relatively shorter term need. It's somewhat cyclical because whenever the next big innovation comes out, that would be needed again. But typically there are times of drastic change, and then things kind of settle down for a little while, and then those times come back. I spent some time thinking about, like, would you have dedicated prompt engineers, like people who are just experts in AI?
Yeah.
I don't think there would be a lot of that. I think it really needs to be kind of a core part of every marketer's skill set. I guess certain types of roles may become less significant, or you might not need quite as many people doing some of the work that's traditionally been done by beginners. But I think, what we've seen over time is there's been many moments of drastic change and innovation, disruption, and the last, at a minimum, in the last, the years that the United States has been around. And there's always adaptation that happens, and new roles are created. Some jobs go away, and people get reskilled and are able to adapt and move. So I feel like, I don't know that the org structures will be dramatically different. I think, outside of having maybe fewer people doing the types of work that beginners traditionally might have done, or early stage career people might have traditionally done. I think your point about product marketing becoming more important earlier is a really interesting one, because of that scope and the role being somewhat deep in product, somewhat deep in customer, understanding the brand. It is different than your traditional growth marketing, lead gen role, and it's not product management. It's really, we really kind of sit in the middle. So I think that's an area where we might see some additional growth in the future.
I have a question for you on some of the new grads or the early in career, and obviously we both have kids that will be entering the workforce and so forth. What's the opportunity for them? I mean, if a lot of organizations, I think there's not as many positions open, right? Particularly for these new grads. What do you think the opportunity is for them to find their place?
I think it's going to be really important to develop, if you will, kind of an identity or a personal brand and set themselves apart. I feel like, yes, in many cases, entry-level roles have gone away. I feel like in some cases that may be very short term. And I remember when, I remember when the internet first got big and there were all these concerns about the internet, most of which never came to fruition. And I think that the need to invest in AI is very real. And the fact that entry-level jobs may seem like the easiest place to cut may be the best short-term decision, but eventually those entry-level roles have to adapt, right? Like if I can have AI doing certain things for me, then what can I use young talent to do? It's not that there's not a need for them. It's maybe just that the previous need that, they might have even thought was the need when they were studying may not look the same, but everyone's experimenting, everybody's learning, we're all adapting. I don't think we know yet where the entry level people might fit in all cases, but I choose to believe, and I'm an optimist, but I've also lived through some changes. I think that they'll just come back and look like different opportunities in the future.
So I align with that, and actually, and I've said this. I think I've shared this a couple times on the pod, but for I think it was like 10 years. 10 years ago, we had stopped our co-op or intern program, and everybody was busy, and it's like you want to give them the best experience and all that kind of stuff, and so we were all heads down. We didn't think we could do that, and so Francis, our CTO, had come in, and he's like, "Look, the first thing we need to do is restart that intern and co-op program, and let me tell you why." He said, "These folks are the first generation of AI native people. They've used AI throughout their entire, post-secondary, college, university, and they bring the power of a beginner's mindset. And it's free from the whole, hey, this is kind of how we usually did it before, and here's the nurture that we did, and here's the right?
Right.
And I am so impressed with some of the interns and new grads that have joined, and it's largely concentrated on the technology side. They are incredibly bright. And I think you said it well. Cutting that level might seem like the obvious thing to do, but I think it is short-sighted because they are your future leaders, and you need fresh energy too. You need all energy to kind of come together. And I think if you don't have that, I think that's how you lose your innovative edge in a way. So
I agree with that, and it's great that your leader had the foresight to realize, hey, we need to bring in the young talent, and with this disruption and with the innovation, bringing in these minds who, like you said, are not coming with a perspective of how things might have been done in the past. They may bring some new ideas and some expertise and approaches that it may take longer to develop with people who have been in their roles or who are for a long time or who are more experienced. So it's a good blend.
For global companies that want to accelerate their AI journey, which I feel like everybody is, I mean, you're living and breathing that today at HP. What would you say are the biggest roadblocks to overcome?
I think first is just time, right?
Yeah.
Like I think it's rare for companies to say, we're learning something new. We're going to take 20% of your time, 10% of your time every week to focus on this. Um,
Right.
and even if they did, I don't know that people would really follow that because the bigger pressure is what has to be done this week or this month. So I think just the having the time and the opportunity is really important. The change management is critical, and
Yeah.
I think it can be very difficult to do at scale. And
Yes.
again, I think a multifaceted approach works where you're enabling people, you're communicating with them, sending them tips, you're offering them training opportunities where it's not a huge time investment, but maybe they can
Yeah.
spend an hour or two a week, or a few hours a month in learning the tools, encouraging best practice sharing, like we talked a little bit about earlier, where people are feeling like they can go to each other and ask for help or suggestions, or and really be encouraged to share what they've learned and what's
Mm.
worked best for them. And just being realistic with the time. It does take time to learn and change.
Yes.
But I think with a combination of opportunity, communication, learning opportunities, you can get there over time. Being realistic, I guess, about the goal is key.
Yeah. What I love about what you had just said is that it was all about the people and the human side of this whole thing, the change
Mhm.
management, and not about the technology. Because I think you're right. It's, are you training people? Are you supporting them? You know, I was moderating an event with a large global partner. They're one of the channel partners, and they were talking about they had a bunch of database administrators and so forth in the room, and IT leaders as well. And there was a lot of this feedback of, well, we had recently deployed these tools, 5% of the org is using them, and using them for very basic use cases at best. And my question to them was, okay, well, what did you do from an end user training perspective and an enablement perspective and helping meet people where they're at? Because only 3% of a team will be what you would consider like an innovator. Most, over 50%, is sort of that like late majority to
Mhm.
sort of actively defying, right, the change. And so most organizations are not doing that. They're just like, look, we fought to get the tool. Here's the tool. Knock yourself out. But that doesn't work.
It doesn't work,
Yeah.
because people are resistant to change, and learning takes time, and hands-on learning takes more time. And with new tools,
Yeah.
I think most people need hands-on.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. Speaking of how hard change is and the pace of change, how do you stay on top of everything without completely losing your personal time and your
Mhm.
weekends? Because you got, like you said, I mean, if your management, like you'd experience 7 hours of the day, you're in meetings, now you're knocking stuff out. How do you, how do you stay on top of everything?
I think it's a balancing act and taking advantage of the time that you do have. For example,
Yeah.
for me, when I commute, I will often listen to a podcast. That's an
Yep.
easy way to take advantage of the time that I'm already spending getting to work or getting home from work,
Yeah.
and using it for something that I view as not as work, but as helping me and teaching me. So taking advantage of opportunities to use that time more productively, and then being realistic about what you should know and where you should
Mm,
be in terms of
yes.
your depth of knowledge at any given point, and accepting that somebody else will know more than you, somebody else will know less than you. And it's
Yeah.
okay because we're all collectively learning, and we are all human.
Yeah.
And you have to make the trade-off that's right for you.
No,
So
I
sometimes I
agree.
do more. Sometimes I do more, and I take advantage of trainings and workshops and experiments. And other times I don't do as much. So taking advantage when there is time and being realistic about goals is key.
No, no, great point. I guess it's like you make the time if you need to make the time. To your point on, the commute in, it's kind of like when you have kids, before you have kids, you're like, well, I'm busy. All of my time's allocated. And well, you managed to find time. Um, Jaynie, thank you so much for coming on. This was a ton of fun. And I think just your journey where you have actively self-selected to say, look, I want to get back into this, get hands-on, experience this firsthand, I think is a really contrarian and smart strategy. And just thank you for sharing the journey with us.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it as well. Appreciate the opportunity.